So I appreciate everybody who makes the time tonight to learn more about the legislative process. We hope this session, this webinar style session, is going to be an important tool for us to include in our online activist toolkit to increase local literacy in how the legislative process works, A, but really B, how to engage with it. So you just saw the agenda. Basically what I'm trying to talk through with you is 3 different sections. 1, how the bill becomes the law. B, how to really navigate the legislative website. And then C, just tips and tricks for testifying and how to approach legislators and all that. Graham will help throughout me talking, monitoring the chat and interrupting me if there's questions. You can also use the hand raise function if you want to interrupt and have a question, or just also even unmute yourself if you're comfortable to ask a question. We certainly have quite a bit of time here until 7:30. Of course, want to leave some time in the end to like stop screen sharing and seeing each other and going into questions and answers. We might even stop the recording at that point. So yeah, just feel comfortable. I try not to speak too fast. Let me know if I speak too fast. I'm happy to slow down then, or at least try to for the moment. So starting with how a bill becomes the law here in Vermont. You see this figure. This is actually a resource that is provided by the legislature itself. And in the top left corner, you see the first item is, of course, the bill introduction. But already here, I want to note, it's important to know House and Senate actually have different rules. And you think everything plays out when the legislature is in session, right? In terms of how the bill becomes the law. I would argue that's actually not true. Because in the House, there's a bill drafting deadline, and that is January 31st. At least it was that deadline this year. So any legislators, before the bill is even introduced, have to abide by that deadline and basically go to their legal counsel. There's a whole council of lawyers in the State House called Legislative Council. The lawyers that consult with citizen legislators, our legislators are random citizens that get elected. They might not have any legal expertise. So they have to go to the legal counsel with their various issues they want to draft legislation on by that deadline to have a bill drafted. And if they miss the deadline, then they can still introduce legislation, but it's more difficult. So then later, it's only possible by amending an existing bill, or if a whole committee of jurisdiction has interest in introducing a bill, and then they can do something that's called a committee bill. So basically what I'm saying is in the House, you already have to work with legislators way before January 31st to figure out what is the legislation you want to see introduced and lobby them way before the session so that they can meet that deadline. In the Senate, it's different. It's actually easier, not more difficult, because they don't have that bill drafting deadline. A senator or standing committee can introduce a bill at any time. So first reading of the bill is very simple. It's basically on the floor of the chamber of either House or Senate. The bill number gets read and the title, and then the clerk will refer the bill to the bill's committee of jurisdiction. So that's whatever committee is concerned with the topic that the bill relates most to. So that's basically the first step. And then the bill is in that committee of jurisdiction on the wall. And I will put in the chat a link to our online document that walks you to a whole bunch of State House lingo. When a bill is on the wall, it means literally when you go into the State House and you might peek into some of these committee rooms, there's like a pin board on each committee room on the wall, on their wall, and it has little paper, literally printouts of the bill number and titles that they have in possession right now Of course, that's also virtually available these days on the State House website. But that was on the wall means. And why that's an important term, on the wall, because just because you have made it to a bill introduction and a referral to committee doesn't mean your bill goes anywhere. It might just sit there on the wall throughout the whole session. The committee might actually never end up talking about it. And in the end of the session, the bill might die. And that's another typical legislative lingo term. It means the bill, ceases to exist. So that would be unfortunate, of course, and that's why talking to legislators is so important. And I also wanted to say in this point where we are of committee consideration, another really important thing to know is, our session here goes from January to May, but it also is a biennium. So it's actually a 2-year session. So just because a bill didn't make it the first year, it can still make it the second year. But after the second year, bills that haven't been considered will have to be reintroduced and start from scratch and be redrafted and all that. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, if you're planning in your strategy, sometimes issues have there's time-sensitive issues, right? So if you plan to pass a bill the same year it was introduced, you have to be really careful because there's something we call crossover deadline. And that is already passed this year. It was March 14, and that is the time by which a bill has to be reported out of committee for it to have a chance to make it through the whole process that we're going through right now in time. Because you can see we're just in the top right corner here, and there's much more to come. So that's why there's this deadline, and that's a deadline that's issued every year by the Joint Rules Committee. And then there's also 2 different crossover deadlines, because every bill that has some money involved with it, they usually get another week because they have to go through the money committees, because they don't just go through the policy committees, they also go through the money committees. In other words, there might be more than one committee of consideration. There's, for example, for us, often the Agriculture Committee, but if there's, for example, an appropriation, then it has to go through the Appropriations Committee as well. So once all the committees of jurisdiction have voted the bill out of committee, it goes to what's on the second line here on the bottom right, the second reading. It means now the bill is actually for the first time going to be considered by the full chamber of the House or the Senate. And that means whoever reports that bill, that's someone of that committee of consideration, like will speak about for the first time to all the other legislators of their chamber about what will this bill do. And before second reading, actually what happens is the bill will show up on the notice calendar. And that I can show you on the legislative website in the next step. That's kind of giving every legislator like a heads up, like this bill is going to be second reading tomorrow, so people can like read up on that bill. Not sure that always happens, but that's how it works. And in that second reading, also what happens is, the reporter will be like interrogated. So the other legislators will have a chance to like ask questions and be critical and all that. And then there might be little breaks where that reporter like huddles with their legal counsel to provide answers to those questions, just so everybody's on the same page. What does this bill really do? And offer the best answers to the best of their knowledge. So then they take a vote. And if that progresses favorably and stuff, there's a whole nother day where people can like say like, okay, we actually don't like this bill, and other legislators that have never had possession of this bill because they were not in the committee of consideration, they might hash out an amendment to the bill at that stage and offer it at third reading. And that's why there is a third reading. You think like, why does there have to be a third reading? That's why, because people who didn't work on this bill might actually have something to say about that bill and want to improve it. And so then at the third reading, they vote on it again. And if that was favorably, that bill passed that chamber. And at that point, what you see here at that green line will start all over from the top where we talked about bill introduction in the other chamber. So this whole process is redundant because, laws are not just black on white letters on paper. They actually really shape and affect our lives. And that's why the process needs to be redundant, so that a second body of either the senators or the representatives, wherever the bill started, can do their part to consider this legislation, and they might end up having an entirely different perspective on this legislation. Advocates who didn't know about this happening might kick into gear in the second phase when this process starts over, so that there's a second opportunity to finesse this. And then we can go now already on the bottom line. You might end up after let's say you had a House bill and that got voted out favorably. Almost there, Nathan. I'll stop in a second here for your question or point. The Senate might end up having a different version of the same bill. And so that's why you see in the bottom left, there's a committee of conference. So one of a sudden, you actually had a bill that passed both chambers, but the different versions have to negotiate it and mitigate it to one final version. And so representatives of the original committees of consideration will be delegated for that specific committee of conference to negotiate the final version of the bill. At that time, there's no new content added. It will be really just pieces of version A and version B puzzled together, but no new stuff added to it. And after that, of course, the governor has to sign the bill into law. He has 5 days for that. If that doesn't happen, then it is assumed it just passes without signature. And you know very well, because we have Governor Phil Scott, that there's also the veto option. And if the veto option is used, then maybe if there's a special session, the legislature will override that veto. That's rather not so typical. But hey, for the sake of this training, let's assume it was signed into law, and then we have a law. And I see Nathan had a question.
I was just wondering, is there some process, like what is the determination for which chamber has first consideration?
It really depends which legislator is taking the initiative. So, sometimes it's a strategic aspect. Like, let's say you as a citizen advocate, you come into the game really late. You might want to approach the Senate because, as I said, they don't have a bill drafting deadline. They might be able to, they're also smaller. It's less people. They might be able to quicker work together to get something done for you. But, there's less senators. So strategically also, maybe you have a much better relationship to some of the House people. So if you're early enough, you might want to start in the House. And then if there's a bill with money attached, I think that's a limitation. I think that one, that's wrong. But, it's often strategic, and often it has to do with the relationship advocates have to their representatives and senators, and of course then the proactive actions of
the session starts before the session. In a sense, if you want to get someone to write a law, ideally you're talking to that person before the session starts. So Saren was asking, when does that conversation start happening, or when do you think about that start happening?
That's a really good question, because these legislators are, as I said, are also just people, and they're citizen advocates. That means they have other jobs when they're not in the legislature. That means it's actually really hard to talk to them when they're not in the State House. So my best, of course, there's not the perfect answer to this question, but my recommendation would be, because we have a biennium, if you have an issue that's new, I would not wait till the first year of a biennium to hit the ground running then, but I would start building relationships, showing up in the State House. You have to find your champion, because that's actually one of the key things. that's what we're talking about. You need to find your champion, someone who will represent your interest. Ideally, it's the legislators actually representing you, but it may not be, because your legislator might not be in the committee that you want to work with. So I would recommend go to the State House the second year of a biennium and start building those relationships, start finding your champion, and start finding that champion who commits to working with you on your issue. And if you have that squared away, that legislature then, during that second year of a biennium, where they're not planning to introduce anything, can already work with legislative counsel potentially to get like a bill like just drafted that's not going to be introduced, that you can look at over the summer and like finesse with your partners and allies. And then you have time basically until the bill drafting deadline of the first year of the biennium next year, right? And can meet that deadline because you had like all that summer to work on that, and you had already your relationship squared away in terms of the champion who's going to introduce the bill for you. And then still aim for introducing your bill in the first year of the biennium, because then you have 2 years to get it passed. And then all that work is not wasted, so to speak, if you don't get it passed the first year. You still have chance to keep ramping up your lobby game and pass it maybe in the second year.
And I just wanted to add a couple of thoughts to that, and that's that, there's also organizations like, depending on the issue, depending on what your ask is for legislature, maybe it's for that particular representative, it's important to be explicit about that. If this is your personal rep you're reaching out to, and your goal is just to have them hear you and to start building that relationship, but if you have specific asks, like I really would like you to introduce legislation to address X, Y, or Z, or I'd like you to direct me to particular people who would be the right people for me to talk to get introduced and legislation like this introduced. And then there's organizations, for example, if the issues of a particular nature, like Rural Vermont or NOFA Vermont, a lot of these membership-based organizations that are legislatively active, who you can also go to try to get their support in helping you have those conversations and helping to do that drafting and have some support in that respect. And I know some folks on this call, have some experience with that as well.
This is it. Maybe one thing I wanted to mention, just looking at this first page, you see here House and Senate mentioned. This is where you can basically get info about what's happening on the floor. You see like when are they on the floor and which day. That might change throughout the session. You can click the live video link. You can see the journal, which means like here you find what happened yesterday. And you can also see the calendar, which is like what happens today. Let's see, I will just open this one. This is the calendar from today here. And one bill I want to kind of use as an example to talk through with you is the cottage food bill. And I think I happen to know that there was second reading on that today. And you see it was on the calendar here as new business. It doesn't say second reading, it just says favorable with amendment, which is one reason why we do this training, because no one understands that if they're not familiar with these calendars. But that's what it means. And you can even, let's see, you can even click here. Can you click here? And then you even see the bill printed in the calendar. So technically, there's like every day, there's a whole like print shop in the State House. They print all this stuff in paper version. You can just go in the State House and take a copy of the calendar and even find the written version of the bill you're interested in potentially that day in that calendar. So that's convenient. But you don't really want to waste that paper, and maybe these calendars are really hard to look at for you. So what you most commonly probably will do, you use the search bar. This is also where you find your legislator. And in the search bar, if you know the bill number you're looking for, I happen to know that the cottage food bill is 401. I'll show you a couple other things too, but this is how we start this training now. It takes you to the bill's website. Here you really see who are the champions. So this guy, Jonathan Cooper, is the champion, the lead champion for this bill, which is about, exempting home food producers from licensure. It tells you right here what's the last thing that happened to this bill. So it already tells us here, hey, they voted in favor on second reading and they ordered the third reading. You can find a link here to the bill text. You can click that, then you see the bill. This is how a bill looks like. You see, when you look at a bill, all this legal language, and good to know is when it's underlined, it means it's new. When it's not underlined, it means that's actually already the law. And when there's like 3 stars, it means like, wait, there's like more stuff in between here that they're not displaying. And that's just a quick note how to read a bill without reading this bill now with you. But what I wanted to show you here is it shows you like everything that happened to that bill. So kind of, we just did the how the bill becomes the law section of this training. So here you can see like it was introduced on the House floor on February 27, read the first time, and it was immediately referred to the Committee on Agriculture, Food Resiliency, and Forestry. And then you see, basically here it was how it progressed, that it had to go through another committee, Ways and Means, because it's about money, and all that. Today it tells you here now that it was read the second time. And what else happened? You see like who was the person who talked about this bill, and it was for Ag, Representative Byrd, who was a orchard farmer, and then for Ways and Means it was this guy, this person. Yeah, so this is kind of a nice overview just to show you like how a bill progresses. When you like in the middle of the session and you want to know like, did my bill make it? And you like go to a bill like this. H4, that was actually a bill that was introduced really early, and you see something like that this time of year, you see like, oh, this bill is going to go nowhere this year, because now you're after crossover deadline. There's not much progress on this bill, and no one will work on this bill this year, because this bill should have been on the House floor now, because it's past crossover deadline. And you also learned, because we're in a biennium, hey, maybe they're going to work on this bill for standards for care of egg-laying hens next year, because we're in a biennium. Now I want to show you the committees pages. So you have up here your different tabs, and here's your committee tab. And I click here on the House Committee of Agriculture. That's where I often look. And most important button here is the agenda. And know that this document is a living document, might change any time. This is kind of just the projection, like what they're planning to do, and you kind of see what they've been doing today, and you get an idea of what they will be concerned with all week and who will testify. So hey, you see here tomorrow at 10 o'clock, we are going to be there for our Small Farm Action Day. And some of you on this call are going to actually be there. And it's actually visible for the whole public that that's going to happen. But if you say, like, we're actually concerned right now, like in this example with the cottage food bill, right? And let's say you want to know, hey, when did they talk about that? I totally missed that. Well, then you have to click into this tab here, previous meetings, which is a little overwhelming because you're like, I really don't know when it happened. And then there's all these different things, but you can just ignore that. Just click on this button, full report. And when you're in there, it's also very overwhelming because it's a very long list. So then it's important to use your Control F function, which pops up your search bar for your browser. And then you just look for your bill H401. And then you see right immediately that it's been considered 8 times. Let's see if that was the first time. Yeah, the first time it was considered, it was introduced by the champion. That's how it usually happens. The champion has to explain why they are doing this, proposing this legislation. And then you can see, like, I want to know, like, who testified on this bill. So here's the next thing. Okay, second time it was considered, Legislative Council talked about it. So that's also very typical. After the sponsor had a chance to talk about it, the lawyers explain what the bill does and puts it in perspective. So, okay, then the third time, and that was, you can see here, on March 12th, Peter Hopkins testified from Happy Valley Farm. And after that, the Department of Health testified, and then I testified in favor of that bill. And then the fiscal office had a chance to testify on it. Then the legal counsel did the markup. That's kind of like wrapping up the work on the bill, so to speak. And then the committee voted on it. That's it. So Peter Hopkins testified. So let's say you want to know, like, what did he say? Remember when, now we have to, like, what did he say? So you know that these things are being recorded. Like, now that we had COVID and stuff, everything went virtual. Actually, all these things are now on YouTube, the recordings of these things. So when you know, hey, Peter Hopkins testified in House Act on March 12th at 11 a.m. At 11:30 on March 12th. I'll just make a little note on my paper here of that, so that I can find the recording on YouTube. Because on YouTube, it won't say Peter Hopkins testified. It will just say March 12th, 11:30. But maybe he also submitted some written testimony. So let's look for that. So when you hear there, this is like also very redundant. All this information in this section you can find either by today's date, under the bill's date, just looking for documents. But we know now, like, what we're looking for is not like, like, we can go different ways. Maybe you don't know who submitted written testimony. So you could also just go to here, the bill 401, the folder, and then you can see, like, all the witness documents. So you can find Peter Hopkins' written testimony there, but you can also go here to witness and look for Peter Hopkins in there. And find his written testimony. Zack. So anyone testifying tomorrow, this is kind of part of the rules. If you use a written testimony that you read, or you use a PowerPoint presentation that you show, you have to give it to the committee as a public record, and they put it on this website. So you can also say, I don't want to use any of this stuff, and just speak free-handedly, so to speak. Then you don't have to submit anything. So let's find the recording. I'm just quickly going to put up, pull up YouTube. So here's the page, and here you see why it's a problem. You only have the date and time. So you have to go here, figure it out a little bit. There's a lot of links here, but they're not complete. So you actually have to go to the Live tab. And in the Live tab, there you see really all the videos, at least of that year. Nathan, our legislative intern, has to do a lot of typing of everything we monitor, because we don't believe these videos will stay here forever. And what the legislature discusses is actually also important for later interpreting the laws, because they reflect the legislative intent. So we're looking for March 12th at 10:30. Here's March 12th, 10:15. So I know, like, when I just click in here, that probably Peter is somewhere in here. And it's helpful to just go with your cursor over this so that you can kind of see a little image of what's happening. And then can figure out if the person you're looking for already appears on your display. Oh, this is the wrong time. We say 11:30. That's also typical. It happens. (10:30). Okay, this part I didn't really prepare well. So this is a little bit challenging to find the right recording, but this gives me the opportunity to give you a plug for our great Rural Vermont website, because we realized that this is really challenging for people without this training to know like where to find the recording they're looking for. And that's why we created on our webpage actually something we call just legislative committee recordings, and have like a whole website where at least over the issues that we're covering, we're featuring the links to the recordings so that you don't have to go through this trouble. So I'll don't waste our time right now to keep looking for Peter on the internet. You get the idea of how this works. Let's see what else I wanted to cover. Are there any questions so far?
This is Graham, and I was just going to comment that it's not that unusual in my experience to go between, record on the State House page and then to YouTube trying to find that recording and realize there's like a 30-minute difference or something, because it can very easily happen that, some folks testify in committee go a little longer, and then, the YouTube clip that they choose starts at a totally different, not totally different time, a time other than the one you're actually looking for. So just worth understanding that there's often some discrepancies between those, and just explore within an hour on either side. Or if you're really in a pinch, you can actually go back to the agenda from that week on the legislature's webpage to see if there were any last minute adjustments or anything.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I still wanted to show you, just navigating these different committee pages. Let's say you don't really know this Ways and Means Committee at all, and you're like, hey, my bill was there, like, did they like vote on it? And it's like just in time. And you can see here when you click on this bill tab. Oh, no, it's up here. You can see they have this documents and handouts tab, but they also have this bills in and out of committee tab. That's every committee has that. But it's another easy way to find like what bills do they have in that committee. Like this is your wall basically. This is the bills on the wall. That's the virtual version of that. And then there's the bills out of committee. And there you can see, 401 is out of committee. And now I wanted to point out that this website is actually much more richer than just the current legislative process. It's actually also an archive of all Vermont laws and all the past legislative sessions. So here's a little thing on the website that's everywhere where you go, that's small but mighty. So here you can actually digitally put you back into the past and change the session you're looking at. So you can like go back to this legislative website, how it was in previous years. So for example, just to give an example, back here, we go to the last biennium, 2023-2024 session. And let's say we go here to Bill, Act, Search. And you say, hey, wasn't there this Act 59, like this biodiversity bill? What was that again? And this is also an important part of the training. So a bill has a bill number, right? But let's say it passed into law. Okay, that's when it becomes an act. That's when you stop to refer to the bill with H, whatever it was. You really got used to it. Forget it. Now you start referring to the act, because now it's a law. And you don't just refer to the act number, you also always refer to the act number's year, because they recycle these numbers. There's maybe an Act 59 next year, but you only know what Act 59 you're talking about when you say Act 59 of 2023. So here are we in the session 2023, 2024, and now I can just put in here 59, and then I can find that community resilience and biodiversity protection law that used to be H126. And here you can see the last recorded status was that the governor actually allowed this to become the law without his signature. And you can see all the different versions of that bill. In the end, you can see here the version as enacted. That's kind of, as enacted means that's kind of the official version of that law. I will not click into that now. This was just a kind of a fun fact that you can go back and anything and everything people might refer to in your environment as act this and act that, find it on the legislative website like this. And the other thing important to know is, you know, an act is basically just the end of this process, right? This is how they like change the law through this legislation that passed. But it's not the law, it's an act. It's an act to change the law. What's actually the law, let's go back to our, let's just go back to current session. What's actually the law is all in here. Vermont laws, Vermont statutes online. This is the law. Title 1, 2, 3, 4, all the different titles. This Vermont law has 33 titles. That's all what Vermont law is, 33 titles. Agriculture is all Title 6. So, for example, on-farm slaughter, one of our lead issues, where is that? I can show you. It has a citation. It's 6 VSA 3311A. That's where you find it. Every law has a citation, and it's not the act. It's 6 VSA, it's 10 VSA, the title, VSA meaning Vermont Statutes Annotated or whatever, and then the section. So on-farm slaughter is 6 VSA 3311A. I don't know what the chapter is really called, but you see all these numbers here. Just have to find 3311A, blah, 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 scroll, scroll, scroll. Aha, it's in chapter 204, preparation of livestock and poultry products. That chapter includes all the sections from 3301 to 3319. So we'll find our 3311A in there. So I click in there. And then you see all the different sections of that chapter of the law. And oh, there you see 3311A is livestock, inspection, licensing, personal slaughter, itinerant slaughter. So they don't call it on-farm slaughter law. They call it these random assortment of words. But we know it's the on-farm slaughter law. And you know, you can read our fact sheet on the Rural Vermont website, but it's better you just know the law. And this is, if you just read this section, if you do on-farm slaughter, you know everything about on-farm slaughter you need to know. And also why I pull this up, because this is a nice example to say like, the act is not the law. It's just the act to change the law. Because when you look down here at the bottom of the on-farm slaughter law, you see the whole history of this law. You see it was established in 23 by Act number 83. So that's Act 83 of 2013. I think I just said it wrong, but that's what you see, Act 83 of 2013. That got into effect in June 10. Then it was amended in 2015 by Act number 64 in section 13 of that act, because an act might include all kinds of sections that change all kinds of laws, not just this one law. So I'm assuming, since Act 64 only changed the on-farm slaughter law in section 13, it did a whole lot of other stuff too. And then it was also changed by Act number 98 the same year, affected though the next year, and so on. Then it was amended in 2019 with Act number 83, section 6, and then 2021 by Act number 47, section 1A. So technically you could do just the spiel we just did, but looking up Act 59 and find all these different acts and figure out exactly what happened. with the on-farm slaughter law. That's just a nice little fun fact. And I think that's where I wanted to conclude this part of the training, just how to navigate the legislative website, and see if there's any questions before we go into tips and tricks for testifying.
A couple of quick things I would add. One is that, in that search bar, Caroline showed, where you can search for a bill number or a committee, you can find any legislators. You can find your local rep, and you can search by their name, or you can search by the district you're in, or your town, I should say. And there you can find their email contact information, sometimes phone. I don't know how often that's still there or not, Caroline. But that's really handy. Another piece of practical advice: if you ever search, just Google whatever it is, a bill in Vermont, you might very well see a page, click on it, and like Caroline said, there have been many bills given the same numbers over time. So you might find yourself on that same legislative page with a bill that doesn't look at all like the bill you're looking for, and you're actually in a different session. You're in a different year. You're back in 2020, 2021 with the same bill number, but with wholly different people. So just be aware that if you go to the website and you are really confused by what you're seeing, reset the year, make sure you're in the present session, if that's the session you're looking for, or at least the session you're looking for. And I had one other thing, but I'm not remembering it quite offhand, so I'll leave it there.
Okay, then we'll do some tips and tricks for testifying, and then we'll still have some time for more questions in the end, because this is going to be quick. So basically, 3 things. First, when you go to the State House, there's a couple things that we can recommend and how to do that. I'll put in the chat here just a link to our advocacy toolkit. There's a video that's our previous communications intern, Melissa, gives us like a tour of the State House, but she gives us like in this video, like tips, like even how to enter and where you find the code room and how to orient, and says things like, you don't even have to knock on a committee room door, but please actually don't do that because it would be disturbing. You just go silently in, and then you sit on the side. There's like space for that, for the public to sit in the committee rooms. But anyhow, most commonly when you go to the State House, you will like hang out in the State House cafeteria, and it's totally normal for members of the public to hang out there and even lurk. Like there's a big glass window on one side before where the tables are, so people can like stand there and literally just see who's in the room of the cafeteria, because people lurk and try to find someone they actually want to talk to, and that's absolutely normal and encouraged, I will say. So yeah, if you're there, just know, as I said, these lawmakers are just representative citizen senators. They are extremely busy, probably really stressed. If they don't have time talking to you when you tap their shoulder, don't take it personally. It's probably something else, not you, that the reason why that moment it wasn't a good fit. But it's also very common that it is a good fit, and that a lawmaker will have at least a couple minutes to talk to you. Those who come tomorrow, what we'll do in the morning, actually, when you go into the lobby, there's a sergeant-at-arms office, and in the sergeant-at-arms office, there's like little paper notes. And in the morning tomorrow, we'll take those paper notes, those are paper messages that the pages, student messengers that work in the State House all session long, that you can fill out to like text when you don't, to Graham's question, like, no, legislators don't commonly share their phone number on the internet. That's often just the sergeant-at-arms office. So when you call the sergeant-at-arms office, you can do that from home, but you can also go there in person. What they will do, they fill out this paper note on your behalf with your message, and then they like text the legislator like a literally paper message that these kids have to deliver to them all day. So that's just a fun fact. But when you go there and you want to talk to legislators, come prepared and have like a 1-minute elevator speech. Like, so Buster, when you're there tomorrow, you need to know what you want from them. You know, if you still want that farm worker housing committee, say that straight, say that right away. Say, I'm a farm worker. I think we need in the state a committee that's concerned with farm worker housing that's permanent. That's the standing committee for that kind of work. And so you want to have something like that, you know, where you can just have 1 minute where you say like who you are and what you want from them, and without going into depth of your whole story and life's background, because they will definitely not have the time for that, and they will just cut you off and go. So that's one thing. But the other thing is, if you actually have time to testify, like we will have tomorrow, you know, in our small farm action day, we have like 8 people testifying. So everybody has exactly 5 minutes and not a minute more to actually also share their story. And because it's like, it's always going to be a crunch time, you know, in making your point. Who knows how much time you have, and it's actually better you don't speak all the time, but leave time for the committee to ask questions and discuss what you said. So we recommend using this testimony sandwich for like writing up your testimony and using this as an outline. And this, what we call testimony sandwich is basically this. So you start by thanking them for having you, and you just share like a short introduction, who you are, your farm name, the town you're from, and what you do. And then you tell them in 1 sentence, this is your elevator pitch, like what you're asking them to do. And then you go over to like elaborate, like why are you asking them to do that? You share your story a little bit, like what's the background for this ask? You kind of summarize that for them. And then you will repeat yourself, and you will tell them again what you're asking them to do, because they hear a lot of stuff, and it's important you're redundant, because if you're not redundant and you only say what you asked them once, they will likely forget. So you will, what you said at the beginning, why you came there, what you asked them for, you know, some of them might have not listened at that time. You want to tell them again. You basically want to tell them 3 times. You want to tell them why you're telling them, and you want to tell them again. And then you close by thanking them for listening. And you know, that's also a tip maybe, you know, everything is very emotional when it's issues that live up to the level of being a legislative issue. It's all about building good rapport with these policymakers. And if we get aggressive or really upset with them, it's not going to help the good rapport. It's not going to make it more likely that they're going to help you in how they work. So try to keep that in mind, and try to stay as calm as you possibly can, and be respectful and thank them. And maybe then there's a good chance you get some champions after your day in the State House. Yeah, the last thing on here, I already said earlier, if you do have written testimony or PowerPoint presentations or even pictures that you show, that they will want to see that. Here's where I stop, and I see Shannon has her hand up.
Yes, there's a question from Chris from Fabled Farm in the chat. How many words, characters of written testimony do you generally find hits 5 minutes?
Oh, I don't know. How I do it is I write it out and then I practice it, because it's also helping when you're nervous. Some people might be a nervous speaker, you're going to speak in public. So it helps just write it out and try to say it out loud. Stop your own time. And if you notice, this took me just now 15 minutes, then you know you have to cut it out, you know. But it also really depends on how you format. So you know, I wouldn't do it by characters or words. I would just do it on like writing it out, timing, practicing it once at least, timing that, maybe editing what you wrote, timing yourself again, and if that was a good fit, you know, you were in your time, then you have use that and practice that a little more, or like just read it a couple times before you do it or something, or read it out loud if you feel comfortable doing it like that.
And I would just say, Chris, based on my experience, because I had some tight deadlines for some talks I was giving last year around that, I did look online for some different information around, like, you know, typical words per minute people speak, just to help me, because I thought for some people that's just really helpful, right, to be able to have that kind of write down there. And I found that, you know, we all talk at different speeds, it was really important for me to slow myself down. So it was really helpful both to like have some benchmarks or like potential ideas for like what approximately might be this amount of time, and then do what Caroline did, which is, you know, try to actually say it out and try to do it a few times so that I do it a bit normal, and then be like, okay, what if I try to really actually be slow this time? That's something I personally found helpful. I recognize we all do this differently. So,
well, it's a good tip, Graham, to try to speak extra slow when you practice, because you will talk faster when you're going live with it.
I know some of you have given testimony before. Like, happy to also hear and have you share any like thing you have found helpful for yours personally, from a either effective standpoint or just from your own personal comfort with the situation.
At that point, Graham, I would think I will stop the recording now, and we can go into sharing, because I think we're done with the training part. Let me see if I can stop this.